This weekend is NASCAR Throwback Weekend at Darlington. And some of the notable schemes for NASCAR's Throwback Weekend, you've got Austin Dillon throwing it back to Dale Earnhardt's 1998 Gold and Black scheme. My favorite, hands down, is Kyle Larson's throwback to Terry Labonte's 1996 championship season. If you remember the old Kellogg's car, the orange and blue one was fine, but the old yellow and red and white one.
With the cornflakes rooster on it.
Right. That one is legendary, and that's the scheme that the Kyle Larson's that's the livery that Kyle Larson is going with this weekend. Chase Elliott's throwback to Dale Jr.'s 2014 Daytona 500 win. That one kind of misses the mark for me. Alex Bowman's throwback to the old Jimmy Johnson scheme, a la mid 2000s, like the Lowe's. That one's really good too. You might have caught on to the fact that I'm for the moment only naming Hendrick ones, but that's because I think they do the best job with it. You've got William Byron's Firestorm scheme, throwing it back to Jeff Gordon. Now, granted, Hendrick also has a lot of legendary paint schemes because of how good their drivers have been. But you also have you also have Daniel Suarez throwing it back to Adrian Fernandez's 2004 IndyCar scheme. Brennan Poole takes the cake in Xfinity. He's going to pilot a throwback to Kyle Petty's Hot Wheels scheme in the Xfinity race. That one's going to be a lot of fun. And that's a situation that kind of gets into what we're going to talk about here, because I would 100%, I don't know that I will watch the Xfinity race, but I definitely am considering it now that I know I'm going to see the Hot Wheels car driving around and taking me back to young Craig watching NASCAR back in the day, or even young Craig playing NASCAR 99. I used to love to drive the Hot Wheels car in that game. It kind of begs the question, what would it look like if IndyCar had something like that? Tony Donahue, one of our friends from 1070 The Fan, used to be at 1070 The Fan, and Burnout Sports. He posed the question on X: if IndyCar had a throwback weekend, what liveries would you want to see? And I think that would be personally would be a good idea for the IMS road course, because the IMS road course, it has its fun moments, but it can, like last year, Alex Palou just kind of ran away with it. Just like any street car, any race where somebody just runs away with it. It got a little boring at times, but what would be fun is if they did a throwback. I think that during the month of May would be a perfect time to do that for IndyCar, is have a throwback weekend race. And so I'm going to go through some schemes. I went a little bit overboard with it. I tried to get some for every single team, so I'm probably going to miss some obvious ones, but this is just where my head was at. So for Team Penske, starting off with Will Power, if he did the 2018 Indy 500 winning silver paint job, that would be really cool. Obviously, the Yellow Submarine is always an option when you have Penske out there. Scott McLaughlin could throw it back to 2002, Elio Castroneves, his Indy 500 winning scheme, the light red and white that Team Penske used to rock back in the early, in the early 2000s into right.
I mean, even before that, early 90s.
Yeah,
we're talking. I got it pulled up here. Let's see. 1989 was the first time I'm seeing that paint scheme, and that was with Emerson Fittipaldi.
Right. And so, because when I started this, I was I was trying to think of number specific things. But then once I got into Rahal, I was Rahal Letterman, I was okay, you know what? I'm throwing that out. I just want to see cool schemes that you could do based on the driver, or the team. Rahal Letterman, I loved Graham Rahal's Steak and Shake car. That's probably the best car that I've seen him have in IndyCar. If the Marlboro-esque Team Penske livery is taken, any throwback to Granddad Emerson Fittipaldi would be sick for Pietro Fittipaldi. That's seven. If you want to look at a cool paint scheme, 7-Eleven, the baby blue scheme that Emerson Fittipaldi rocked at the Michigan race that he won in 1985, was a pretty cool one. Meyer Shank, they don't have a ton of cool liveries, but they could rock it back to Elio's 2021 500 winning livery. He could literally drive it. If he wanted to, he could just drive that livery, which is funny because it's this is during the month of May. Elio's only running the 500. Later on we could talk about Takuma Sato could run either an F1 livery that he rode during the U.S. Grand Prix when it was an Indy, or he could do an Indy 500 winning paint scheme as well for him. And that could actually entice some of these like legends who are kind of still on the fringe of IndyCar still, that just maybe run the 500. That could entice them to run both races. I know that they're usually just one-offs, and that would be a little bit, that would be extra money for them to do, but that would still be, kind of a thing that could potentially get some of those guys back. Who goes Hollinger? Grosjean throwing it back to the Haas F1 livery that he was driving when he had the infamous Fireball crash. That would be pretty cool to see him rocking similar colors to that. Ed Carpenter, Ed could throw it back to the Fuzzy's vodka colors back in the early 2010s. Dale Coyne, an homage to Justin Wilson would be cool. The Z-Line livery he used to have. Then looking at like Chip Ganassi, you've got Juan Pablo's Montoya's 2000 Indy 500 winning livery. The only problem is that they were Target, Chip Ganassi, for the longest time, and were only sponsored by Target. That there's not a lot of different liveries for them. You could they ran a blue one. I can't remember what the primary sponsor was for that. But it was like one of their secondary sponsors.
The blue one.
Was that?
Wasn't that NCT Data?
But no, it was before that. It was
Carvana.
Right, but I'm thinking of like I'm thinking of like early 2008 Scott Dixon, like Dan Weldon, Dario Franchitti. They used to race a blue livery, and I think Cottonelle's the only thing that's coming to my mind, but I know it was like one of their secondary sponsors would be like their sponsor for like one or two races, and it would be like blue. And that's what I'm trying to remember what it is. But regardless, like I said, though, it's funny that they've been Target for so long. There's only recently has it been like DHL, PNC Bank. So like there's American Legion. Juan Pablo's HP F1 livery could be cool too. There's a lot of F1 things, especially on the road course, that you could throw it back to as well. I'd love to see a car, have a Ferrari livery or a Ferrari-esque livery, throwing it back to Michael Schumacher. Now, and going off of that, real quick before I go to Arrow McLaren, because they are the biggest potential F1 livery people. Marcus Armstrong drives the 11. He could rock a Tony Kanaan 711 throwback. That's personally one of my favorite liveries of all time, so I would love to see that. Arrow McLaren, another team that really hasn't had a bunch of different liveries, but well, they did one.
There is one.
Okay, so let me see.
1976, Johnny Rutherford.
Okay, well, I was gonna say, I didn't have that one. That one's not my book. I had James Hinchcliffe. Could do a throwback to him. Lots of potential F1 crossovers here. You could do like something similar to the West, black and silver, a la like Kimi Räikkönen. You could have like the silver and orange Vodafone colors, a la Lewis Hamilton's U.S. Grand Prix at Indy winning livery. There's a lot of things you could do with that. Alexander Rossi could throw it back to his 100th Indy 500 winning Napa colors. So that would be pretty cool. Moving on to Andretti for me, you would have, Colton Herta could rock the shell throwback to his daddy's. That's kind of what his current livery is based off of. He also drives number 26, so a Dan Weldon, Jim Beam throwback would be cool. Marco Andretti's New York Stock Exchange throwback would be awesome. So would Dario Franchitti's Canadian Club orange and black livery. That could go back to the number 27 and Kyle Kirkwood. Michael Andretti's Kmart livery is another good one. And then AJ Foyt, anything AJ Foyt related would be cool. And if not that, maybe Kenny Brack's Power Team white, yellow, and red scheme he ran when he won the 1999 Indy 500. So, you kind of think like, oh, what are the different ones you could have? And I think, any one of those schemes would be cool to watch that first weekend back at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Yeah, so I guess I kind of looked at this as a different view, but like with McLaren, it was an all orange car. It was very similar to what Fernando Alonso ran when his first year, the only Indy 500 he ran, but where it was all orange with like blue accent and trim. But for me, I just kind of looked at like some iconic ones overall that I would like to see. I don't really necessarily care who runs them, but like for instance, 1982. This one kind of a combo. This leads into NASCAR a little bit, but 1982 winning car with Gordon Johncock, the red and light blue with white trim STP car. Um, that's just an iconic from across both uh, NASCAR and IndyCar. If you're looking at Rahal, I would go with Bobby's 1986 winning Budweiser car. It was just all red and it just said Bud in random places. That was really nice. But yeah, with Penske, if you go with the white and red scheme, whether it was the old Marlboro schemes, those were just amazing. Those were the best. Um, the other ones I looked at, yes, definitely Juan Pablo Montoya's Target scheme with the lightning bolts on the side. Definitely that one. And then the last two that really stood out to me. One, I'll leave this other one for last, but my next one is definitely the 2019 Simon Pagenaud Menards car. That bright yellow, I don't know, that's just so cool, and it was very different. I really like that one, but the one that I think it would be awesome to see somebody run is the 2011 Dan Weldon number 98 William Rost car. The orange, the white, the black. That was one of in my opinion, that was like one of the best liveries. It was just a cool looking car overall. So I would definitely say that one I would love to see again.
Yeah, and going back to Menards real quick. I mean, there's a lot of good Menards. Like if you want to go to like Tony Stewart, Greg Ray, there's a lot of good ones. Scott Brayton. There's a lot of good liveries with that. I know we're missing the one
Tony Stewart.
Tony Donahue literally put this one up when he posed the question on X, and I was surprised that you didn't say it, and I didn't want to say it because I wanted to save it just in case we didn't mention it in like the regular rundown. But like the Ari Luyendyk Domino's livery, that's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah.
And that's like the great thing is because it's the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And because it's the start of the month of May, you've got so many different things you could go with, so many homages you could do, not just to because I mean we see Brad Keselowski, his Castrol livery is going to be going to like sport like supercars. I think like that's a throwback to a supercar, if I'm remembering it correctly. A lot of the drivers are doing throwbacks to their like what their liveries looked like during like when they were first coming up through the different series and that kind of thing. So you have a lot of options to maybe throw it to some F1 liveries. Maybe Penske and Ganassi are both in. Well, Ganassi's not still in NASCAR, are they? They're not in NASCAR anymore. But you could do now that Arrow McLaren has their kind of like toe in there. You could have like Pato O'Ward could literally drive a Kyle Larson themed car, like a throwback to his paint scheme when he won, in 2001 the championship that year. Which I mean is the same one he still has, but
what I really like is Kyle Larson's paint scheme this year for the Indy 500 with Arrow McLaren is it pays a little bit of homage back to the original McLaren look with the orange and the blues. And it also incorporates the HendrickCars.com to it as well. But it's probably the closest one we have that pays tribute back to those some of the original schemes.
Well,
I'll tell you what, though,
because of their anniversary, McLaren did do that last year with all three liveries for Rossi, Felix Rosenqvist, and Pato O'Ward. They were all like some sort of throwback to McLaren's history. So like teams are already doing stuff like that, and that would definitely get more eyeballs on the sport. And then you like I said, with being an IMS, you've got so many things, not just maybe team specific, but guys could just run different schemes, like you said, Menards and all that kind of stuff. They could just run certain schemes, and it would, I think, go off without a hitch.
And it wouldn't even have to necessarily have that same sponsor, obviously, but
well, no, yeah,
just the paint scheme.
Right. Well, because I mean that's what you see with like Kyle Larson, like for instance the Lowe's one for Alex Bowman, like it still says Ally. It's just in that Lowe's scheme, so like you can play with it a little bit. Like if Dixon did like a throwback to Juan Pablo Montoya, he could still have it'll still say PNC Bank. It'll just kind of look like the old Target Chip Ganassi cars, which would be really cool.
Yeah.
So just a fun exercise I thought would be fun to do as we enter the month of May. And like I said, I can't, this is one of those things, I think I said it before we started recording, or maybe I said it already, where I'm like, it's one of those things that like, I don't know that it'll ever happen, but now that like the thought has been planted in my brain, that's all I'm going to think about until it eventually happens, because it would be so cool to see those cars running around there in different throwback old school liveries. But so thank you, Tony D, for the idea. Make sure you go I think if I'm getting it right, this is off the top of my head, Tony D Indy on X, if you want to go follow him. He's got a podcast as well, so we're going to give him a little bit of a shout out.